Good afternoon, and welcome to episode 3 of On the Frontlines. I'm your co host, Dan Sinisi, here with Alan Shaw, partners with Sound Training Group. Today, we're on the air from beautiful Stamford, Connecticut, in our offices. Hope you're having a great day. Today, we're going to take a few minutes to discuss and understand having a good working relationship with law enforcement agencies and how our similarities and differences establish and help build those relationships.
One of the first things that I remember learning in security and security training was you're not a cop. You're not a cop. You're not a cop. It was repeated over and over again how you're not the police. And while that is true, it never really got into the idea that there are some similarities between the public and private sector, and there are some big differences. But none of these ever talked about building relationships. And I'm a firm believer, as is my partner Dan here, that you cannot do private security without having a good working relationship with the public sector police. Or you can do it, but it won't be successful. You are going to be on incidents together. You are going to be helping each other out in some capacity. I'll start off with a real quick anecdote that was relayed to me by somebody else in the industry. I wasn't at this incident, uh, although I was involved with it from my position as a dispatcher. An incident goes on at a large building. It's a shopping mall. There's a burglar alarm. The police respond to check out the burglar alarm, as do the security. They go, they handle that incident. Before the police have left, but after they've checked the building, there's a report of a domestic disturbance in part of that mall that involves a knife. So immediately, the officers that are there are sent. Mall security is notified, and mall security is responding also. Well, the first call, the burglar alarm, was a fairly minor call, so that didn't require a supervisor from the security department. The second call, the domestic with a knife, obviously is a more serious call and does require a supervisor. So when that supervisor gets there, now this is a place where they wear a very formal uniform. He's got a gold badge. He's got sergeant's and collar brass on. It's very clear that he's the supervisor, and he comes up and asks the police officer what's going on. He gets told, "We're investigating an incident." It definitely got the opinion that he was going to get no information, even though he was the supervisor for the building and needs to know what's going on in his building. It was very clear there was not a good relationship. Now here's where the funny part gets in. After this is all wrapped up, that incident's done, police officer goes to get back in his car, and, well, guess where the keys to the police car were? Inside the locked police car. Now starts the who has keys to this car. It's late at night, you don't have the police mechanics available, and they're getting a hold of other officers on duty that have the keys, and it turns out that, well, the security agency has lockout kits and frequently does lockouts in the mall parking lot. Mall security can very easily get into that police car. All you got to do is ask for help. Well, now you're asking help of that guy that you treated poorly before. This is why having a good working relationship, working with each other, is important. You never know who you're going to need help from 5 minutes from now, 5 days from now, 5 years from now. And that's why building relationships is important.
And it's basically an us versus them mentality. Years ago, police officers, for the most part, looked down on security officers, and just like any other member of society, looking at a security officer who most often was underpaid, worked long hours, and had no real training, their perception of security was, as everybody else, just a warm body sitting at a post or standing at a post and not able to do much of anything as far as enforcement or emergency response.
Attitudes are changing, and part of this is going to be that when you're a security officer, you have to have a good attitude about yourself and about what you do. Community standards are changing. We've talked in previous episodes about how the role of private security is expanding. There are even public governments using private security. But we have to understand that there are differences and there are similarities. So I'm going to touch base on the differences right now. Probably the most important one is the jurisdiction. Law enforcement generally has a much larger jurisdiction than security. This is for a couple of reasons. One, governmental areas, a city, a town, a borough, a county, a state, are big areas. And private security, even when they're hired for an area, they're hired for a small area. The biggest area you're going to see is a neighborhood or a business improvement district, but most often you're talking about one building or maybe a campus of a few buildings. So your jurisdiction gets very small, and sometimes you're seen as smaller, as less important when that happens. With that comes your authority. The police have the authority to enforce laws. In general, private security does not have that authority, although there are some limited cases where you do. The interesting thing is your authority, which comes from both state statute and from your employer and client. Sometimes in some areas you have more authority because you're enforcing property rules and you're giving people the choice of follow the rules or leave the property. Probably the biggest one is in retail security, where security doesn't need probable cause to do a search of a bag. Simply the fact that you came into the store is the authorization to search in many cases. The police need probable cause. They need to look at this. They need to investigate before doing a search, and in some cases need a search warrant by a judge. So there's areas where we have very different things. Legal protection gets into that also. There are very often laws that indemnify police officers against certain legal issues. There's the concept of sovereign immunity that plays in with the government. There are no private security companies that enjoy sovereign immunity. There are no, or generally are no, indemnification issues with private security. And then, of course, I'm going to bring up the elephant in the room, and that's pay scale. There are probably every security officer listening to this right now going, I wish I made what the cops made. And there's probably some police officers listening to this going, well, you pay $10 an hour, you get $10 an hour, and that's who you're getting. You're getting people that aren't really capable of what's going on.
I just want to touch on legal protection just for another minute. As far as search and seizures are concerned, police officers have a standard, a constitutional standard. It's the Fourth Amendment. When they're searching a person or a vehicle or a place, particularly if they need a warrant or probable cause. In the security profession, security officers being private citizens, there are no constitutional standards. In the past probably 20 years or so, we've touched a gray area, and security officers have been allowed through certain court cases to have, for example, pat-downs and searches of persons and vehicles. Now, there's a whole information out there regarding search and seizures for private security officer, which is now we're exactly talking about tonight. But there are ways around searching and seizing items from persons who security officers have arrested and so on. But I just want to make it clear that security officers don't have that standard as far as searching and seizing. There are some similarities. Security officers have similar uniforms to police officers. I've been to a mall recently, and I saw a security officer walking his post, and he looked sharp. He was well dressed and well groomed, and from a distance, it looked like a state trooper. And most of us in society, when we see a uniform, a lot of times we can't differentiate a law enforcement officer from a security officer, at least from a distance. If we get closer, we can read the patches and we can read the badges and the other insignia. But The uniforms are very similar. Our duties, we perform basically the same duties. We all do patrols. We do walking tours. We do vehicle patrols. We respond to alarms. We do a lot of different things that that police officers do, only on a smaller scale on private property. We're now getting involved with more parking enforcement and traffic enforcement on private property. So we're doing a lot of the same thing. Responses. We're responding to alarms. We're helping people. We've said this before in our last episode. We're the first true responders on our sites. We're the ones actually responding to the emergencies.
And one of these things comes up that as we're taking on more of a response role, and this comes into play a lot of the times the larger sites, but it can also be the smaller sites, is the perception of the public and the respect that we have or that we get. And I think we need to look at the respect that we should be having towards each other. By no means, when we talk about the similarities and differences between police and security, are we saying not to respect the police. I don't think that's at all where we need to go, but we should be commanding a little bit of respect, and with that comes we have to have self-respect. I can't ask anyone to respect me unless I respect myself, and that's going to mean keeping some standards that maybe aren't the legal minimums. Maybe we do need to be talking about stuff like refresher training, how the public eye sees us. When you go and see a movie or a TV show that features a police officer, very rarely is it a negative perception. Hill Street Blues was kind of gritty. Adam 12 was more of a, hey, look at the police and the neat stuff we can do and what a modern police officer is like. But there really are very few comedies that feature this. But Barney Fife from Mayberg is probably the notable example of a buffoonish cop. Security, almost every portrayal of us is uneducated, uncouth, can't wear a uniform properly. And we have to start looking at these things and saying, this is the way the public sees, so the only choice we have is to present the public with the better alternative. And that means, like Dan said, being well groomed, wearing your uniform correctly, wearing all the parts of your uniform. The public eye, and again, that's going to lead towards the police eye. The law enforcement officers who interact with you, they're going to see that you're a well put together guy. They're going to see that you are giving them good information when you're on a scene together. A lot of times you're going to get there first, and the police are going to say, what do you have? It better not be, I don't know, it looks broke when you're at a burglary scene. It better be something more along the lines of, the alarm went off, I got here, the front window was broken, looked inside real quick with my flashlight, didn't see anybody, checked the back door was locked, waited here in front of the building for you. Okay. And in some cases, in some towns that are small enough that only one police officer is coming, you may be the second guy going in that building on that search. Sometimes they're going to tell you to wait outside. Sometimes you're going to be the backup. The question is, do they trust you to be the backup? And that's where it's going to be coming in and building this relationship and building this trust and really showing that you are a professional.
Here's the issue with respect, and again, we addressed this in the last episode. Security officers always ask for respect, and we get that. The problem is trying to change society's perception, and we include police officers and other, fire and EMS, and other people. But to do that, to get that respect, we don't want to be classified as wannabes, quote unquote. A lot of police officers see security officers as wannabes. That we put on a uniform and a badge, and we're going to play cop. And that's not what security officers are all about. Yes, we have the same similarities with regards to training. With regards to responses and patrols and things like that. But police officers want to deal with somebody that can be a good witness, for example. And a short story comes to my mind when I was a newly minted security officer at a hospital. My partner, who was supposed to be training me, we had an incident and a police officer arrived. And as soon as he got there, my partner started quoting CSI type remarks and trying to, basically got in the police officer's way. And I could see clearly on the officer's face that he was annoyed and basically told him to get out of the way. I, as a new officer, just kind of stood back and watched and drank it all in. After the incident was over, the officer approached me personally and actually thanked me for getting out of his way initially. He had no questions for me. He was there for a specific reason, and he didn't need our assistance. And he wanted to know why the other person was trying to play cop, and of course I couldn't answer that. But he says that that's why police officers, to use the terms he used, don't like security officers because of this this very reason.
Now it's funny when Dan brings up that story. I'll think about a more recent story. Now, one of my big issues is being able to, like I said, give a good report to the officer that's coming, and that's part of report writing and report writing skills, which is one of the classes we offer at SOUD Training Group, is how to write a incident report for security and public safety. But I was on patrol in security, and I hear another officer calling for help. She actually used a code, which is essentially an officer needs assistance. It could be anything from she's getting attacked to whatever. It's an emergency response. You drop what you're doing and you go when this code is given over the radio. I get there, and what it was a car accident. Now, I thought that she had been involved in the accident initially in the security vehicle. What it turned out was, as she was walking to the vehicle, she came across an accident that had just occurred. It involved three people, two vehicles, a support column of the building, and it was a very convoluted story with what had happened. But, I got there because part of my background is as an EMT. My first thing was to make sure nobody's injured. Once I made sure nobody's injured and that we didn't need to get EMS there, now I transition back into a security thing, and I start taking notes. Supervisor gets and says, okay, you need to get a statement from this woman. Well, I already did that. I got the statement in my notepad. Said I'm going to go get the paperwork out of the truck and put it onto the statement form. So I got most of it written. I actually brought the witness up to our security office where she could sit down in a comfortable chair. I took the statement. Now, one of the interesting things we do with this company is that we don't write a report from our own perspective. We write a statement from the witness perspective, and then they sign, and it says that I have read and understand this statement. So you have to write it from their perspective. So anyway, I get this statement written. She signs it. I bring it down. And at this point, the police have come for the motor vehicle collision. And the officer looks at it and says, oh, can I get a copy of that? Well, guess what? The statement that I wrote in my hand is part of the official police report because I was able to be a good resource to the police. While I wasn't the witness myself, I took the witness statement, and the witness signed it with her information, and it had her name, her date of birth, her license number was actually on it. And guess what? We were able to be a good resource to law enforcement. That's really what it's about. Just like law enforcement is a resource that we may call to our security site, we have to be a resource to law enforcement. We have to show that we are providing a value to them.
And speaking of value, one of the, going back to perception, police officers, they look at security officers and say, they have this very minimal training. I mean, barely. And, these are professional people. They've gone through an academy up to 6 months. They're continually training. They're training in all aspects of law enforcement and protection. Sometimes they're cross-trained with fire and EMS. And they look upon security officers as, like I said before, just a warm body there that, for the most part, are there for insurance purposes. But, some states, like we've said before, they don't require any training. In Connecticut we get 8 hours, but we don't think that's even enough here. Neighboring New York gets 24 hours. That's a better start, but we have to really get more training, and if we get more training, we can assist better. We're not here to replace law enforcement. We're looking at it as more as assisting them, trying to help them to do their jobs. And like I said before, sometimes the best thing is just to be a good witness. We don't want to play cop. We're not playing CSI. I had one individual a few years back. He called 911 and started using all kinds of codes, and the dispatcher had no idea what he was talking about. And he finally started talking plain English, and finally, he wasted crucial seconds trying to use their jargon. And that goes back to what we said before: is stop playing cop. You're a security officer, and the best thing you can do is be a witness for law enforcement.
And I'm going to build on that with dealing with dispatchers. My primary experience in public safety is as a public safety dispatcher. I dispatch police, fire, and EMS. And I can tell you that there's been, over the 26 years I've been doing that, a big transition. We were talking about it the other day with codes versus plain language. A few years ago, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, came out with the idea that we needed to be using plain language at all times and to get rid of radio codes, because towns didn't have the same code as the town next to them. There was no standard. Everybody who's familiar with CB radios, which actually I'm dating myself mentioning those a little bit, but everybody knows what 10-4 means, affirmative acknowledgement. Well, a 10-4, when I started dispatching in my department, was an assault with a weapon. 10-4 did not mean, okay, I got it, received. It meant somebody was assaulting somebody with a weapon. That was a unique peculiarity of our town. Even within a town, the local hospital isn't using the same 10 codes as the mall, as the office building. So we have to think about this. We also have to stay away from lingo. I took a call once from somebody who wasn't in security but was in a front desk role at a hotel. And he had a problem with somebody who was reporting a disturbance, and I asked him what the person looks like. And I get, well, he appears to possibly be a Caucasian. I'm sorry, what? There were an awful lot of adjectives and adverbs in that sentence. How about he's white? This comes from two things. One, people think that the bigger words they use and the more words they use, they sound smarter. Guess what? You don't. You sound dumber. Newsflash, big words don't make you smart. The other thing was a certain political correctness that has come into this, where we're afraid to say white or black, male or female. And it's almost like saying, well, I can't say tall or short. He appears to be possibly bigger than a bread box. That doesn't sound like anything a real person would say. And we need to get away from this. We need to start dealing with this. Another thing is your name and identifying yourself. Took a call from a security officer one night. He's reporting a suspicious vehicle on the property. I said, what's your name? My name's Security. I almost wanted to look at, with that old line from the Westerns, that your Christian name, son? Does it say Security on your birth certificate? No, your name is not Security. Your title may be Security. Your position may be Security. And it took a lot to get a name out of this guy, get a title, and then he didn't want to give up his cell phone number. Like there was, I don't know, did he think we were going to publish this somewhere? The police department are not putting up a billboard with your cell phone number on it. Let's not try to start off adversarial, because I'll tell you right now, right in that report that I was giving to the police officers, it said, caller, security officer is uncooperative. That's not how you want to be branded when you're dealing with another agency. And we have to start thinking about these things. Let's try to work together as a team.
Alan's right. I've had a lot of experiences where security officers have called into even the fire department, and myself being in the fire service, I can't tell you how many times I've been on the receiving end of that phone call, and a security officer is calling in for whatever the incident might be, and they're telling me, yeah, there's a fire here. And, well, I got that part, but where are you? What's your address? What part of the building? Are there people inside the building? security officers don't realize when they're making a call, whether it's routine or an emergency, that they should have some information already before making that call. And when you're calling a dispatcher, whether it be for fire, EMS, or police, there's certain information, you should already know. There's a fire, okay, it's in this part of the building, it's on the second floor, we're starting evacuations. You should be telling the dispatcher as much information as you possibly can give them in plain language. They're going to have responding units coming. Dispatcher may hold you on the phone for a while until the first responders get there, at which point they'll take over communications with the dispatcher. But until that point, you are their source of information. You are the go-to person being on that phone, telling this dispatcher what's going on. You are the eyes and ears of that location. You are seeing and hearing everything. Information is being passed on to you. You're passing it on to the dispatcher. This is what makes you professional. Not the lingo, not the fact that you want to play cop, but just being a security officer and being good at it, being a real professional.
And I think one last thing we want to bring up here is something that I hate having to bring up, but we do have to bring it up, and it's one of the bad apples that hurts the private sector and really hurts our relationship with our public law enforcement counterparts, and that is criminal impersonation. Over the past few years, we've seen a lot of incidents with fake police. Some of these are people that are well-intentioned. They're pulling people over. I actually know a security officer who, while on patrol in a supermarket parking lot, would pull people over on the road out in front of the store. And he'd put the light bar on the car. Now, people would pull over for him, even though it was a different color light bar than the police used. And he'd get out and warn them about speeding or things he perceived as a moving violation. I mean, not only is this illegal and unsafe, you may not have the correct information. Police officers are trained in motor vehicle law. In my capacity in security, I've never had any training in motor vehicle law. So the chances of me saying something wrong are pretty high. Some of this is well-intentioned, some of it is criminal. We always hear about the people that pull women over for the purposes of assaulting them. There's been a big push that if you're about to be pulled over, to go to a well-lit area, call police. Today, I was at work in dispatch, and somebody called in to make sure that the two people with badges in their office building that asking questions were really police officers. And even when they were assured that they were police officers, they wanted to know, well, how do you know they're police officers? Well, you did call the police department and ask. And we asked, was anybody out there? And yeah, somebody answered and said, yeah, that was us. So, the public is untrusting of this, and we have to get away from that. I almost didn't want to bring it up, but I'm going to use a line from a movie here. There was a line in the movie Ghostbusters at the very end where they say, Ray, when somebody asks if you're a god, you say yes. Well, in this relationship, we're going to do the exact opposite. Ray, when somebody asks if you're a cop, say no. There's no harm in saying that you're not a police officer when you're in security. Be proud of being in security. Be honorable and ethical as security. Don't go pulling people over unless that's the duty. There's a very few limited security places where you are making motor vehicle stops in some homeowner associations. But in general, you're not there being the police. Be security and be good at that and have a good relationship with the police.
Here's, that reminds me of a story not that long ago, probably about 10 years ago. We had a security officer at the hospital, nice guy. He was on probation. And at the time, when I first started there, we dressed very similar to the Connecticut State Police, including the campaign hat. And a lot of people used to walk up to us when we were patrolling and would ask us why the state police were on campus patrolling. And of course, we had to correct them and let them know we were security officers. But one day, I had a colleague of mine who was taking the train down into the city after work, and he asked me for a ride to the train station. And I was happy to oblige him, and we went down there, and he had to buy a one-way ticket down to the train station. we approached the counter, and the lady behind the counter said to him very clearly, "Oh, troopers ride for free." And he sat there with a big smile on his face, and she, for whatever reason, didn't recognize the emblems on the uniform. We were both in full uniform, and proceeded to give him a piece of paper allowing him to travel free of charge. I pulled him to the side and let him know that it was not in the best interest of ourselves and the hospital that we represented to pass ourselves off as law enforcement when in fact we were security officers. And after a few minutes of talking with him, he went back to the counter and made it very clear he was a security officer. The lady behind the counter, from what I could see, was very annoyed, very upset that he didn't tell her the first time that he was a security officer, and said a word that I won't repeat here, but let's just say it wasn't good. But my point is, we both have, police and security, we both have our jobs to do. And in the end, we have similar goals. We want to protect the public or our clients, and we all want to go home at night or in the afternoon. And, we have to get along. We have to work together as a team, like Alan said. One works with the other. And we in security, being private citizens, have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of information to share with the police to help them to do their jobs better. The police likewise. They are always asking for assistance. So it's a mutual relationship, and we can't continue with the perception of one and the other. Cops being mean and they don't understand us, and the police saying security have no discipline and no knowledge and training, etc. We have to work as a team. And I think going forward, hopefully in the next couple of years or so, we're really going to be able to cement this as we take on continual functions that were formerly done by the police, and just go forward with this.
And I think this all wraps it up very nicely, that again, it's about building relationships, building a team, working together, and being able to be resources for each other.
So this is going to end episode 3 for us. As always, you can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Our upcoming episode is going to be situational awareness. This is something that all security officers should listen to. And we also have a survey out. If you check our posts, if you have any questions related to public safety or security, you can always shoot us an email at soundtraining@protectors.org. soundtraining@protectors.org. And we're going to answer those questions for you on an upcoming episode. And if you want to check out our other recent episodes, you can check out our YouTube channel, Sound Training Group.
Thank you, and have a great day.